Welcome to another edition of my Components Breakdown video review series. Today we're going to look at the Heavens of Olympus, which is a 3 to 5 player area control, area influence game that takes about 60 to 90 minutes to complete. The premise of the game is that Zeus himself wishes to create a new universe, and to do so he assigns 3 to 5 lesser unknown gods the task of completing it for him within 5 days, with the reward being that the god who performs the best by the end of the 5th day being admitted into Mount Olympus and seated amongst the greater gods. Now, we're going to stray quite a bit from the usual routine and format because I have a lot of issues with this game that are either cosmetic or mechanical in nature that I need to address in full because they're really soured the overall experience for me as a gamer and reviewer, which is unfortunate because this is a game I really was looking forward to. So let's start off by looking at the game's components. As you just saw during the introductory segment, the Heavens of Olympus ships in a box that is much too large for the limited amount of components that are included inside the game. In fact, none of the compartments, including this card tray, are sized appropriately to house the components properly without massive shifting. Now, I try not to let such things influence my reviews or my perceptions of games before I actually get the chance to sit down and play through them several times myself. However, initial impressions do mean quite a lot, because every game is an experience for its players. In my opinion, publishers should make their best efforts to produce a quality product that represents the designer's vision, and the Heavens of Olympus does everything in its power to instill just that opposite type of reaction. And this lack of quality is not just with the oversized box and poorly molded insert, but also filters its way into the game's components. And I'll start off with the game board, which is perfectly functional when laid flat, but is also severely warped and assembled or glued improperly, as you can see from my board here. The game also ships with 50 of these power tokens that players will use to pay for particular costs throughout the game, and they come in denominations of 1s and 5s. However, unlike most games, the publisher has decided to keep both denominations not only the same color, but also the exact same size, which is incredibly annoying if nothing else. The game also ships with 5 color-coded sets of cardboard planet markers and 5 color-coded sets of wooden circular markers that will be used to track and denote particular areas on the board that are controlled by each of the specific players. However, the coloring between these two component types is not in any way uniform throughout them, and becomes even more apparent when you add the 5 color-coded allotment boards for each of the players. Finally, the last component I wanted to address briefly was the rulebook, which is actually very well written and easy to understand, but mine came bent in 2 places and was torn right in the middle. Now, once again, these are simply cosmetic problems and probably wouldn't be such an issue to me personally if the game were not littered with so many of them at once. And it's really quite unfortunate, to be honest, because I believe that this is the designer's first game, and by his fault or not, the publisher has manufactured a product that I would have personally never requested to review had I known it was going to be released with this lack of polish and quality. So let's go ahead and move forward and take a brief look at the gameplay and give you my final thoughts. As I previously mentioned, the Heavens of Olympus is an area control, area influence style of game that takes place over 5 total days, or rounds, each of which consists of 3 phases. The goal of the game is to earn prestige points that are tracked around the game board's exterior and can be done both during and at the conclusion of a round or a day. The majority of the scoring takes place within the Heavens of Olympus that are situated at the center of the game board, and will reward players for placing their planets in particular fashions within the heavens, including having at least 1 planet within a region, having the most planets within an orbit, or even having the largest constellation. The heavens are broken into 5 different pie-shaped regions, the bottom 3 of which are used within all of the games, with the regions 4 and 5 only being used when the appropriate number of players are participating. The heavens are likewise broken into 4 circular orbits, which once again are of particular importance at the end of each of the game's 5 scoring rounds. The gameplay is completely driven by a simultaneous action selection that takes place during each of the game's phases, in which all players will secretly select from identical decks one of their 4 plan cards to enact during that phase. Now, each of these 4 plan cards allows the players to request assistance from one of the 4 gods depicted on the game board, each of which provide very specific abilities to that player, such as forging a new planet, or delivering a planet up to the heavens for scoring purposes. The trick is that when players simultaneously reveal their selected plan for that phase, they must pay power tokens in accordance with how many other players pick the same plan that they chose. And if multiple players pick the same plan, actions can actually become very pricey to partake in. So players will need to plan out their strategies according to not only their own needs for that particular phase, but also try to time them when they feel that other players will not choose that same plan, so that they might be able to take that action with the least amount of cost to them personally. Which leads me to one of my two biggest gripes with the game, and that it's just not very engaging for 3 to 4 players. And the reason for us was that it is far too easy to take numerous actions in a row without having to pay cost for them. And as you can imagine, with 3 players, and sometimes even 4 players, choosing the same card as others doesn't really happen all that often, meaning that power tokens rarely affect the game's overall flow, and are mostly manageable from the start of the game to the very finish. Now, this problem is mostly eliminated with the introduction of a 5th player, which makes it far more balanced and strategic to play, but not necessarily more fun for us, which brings me to another one of my issues. The game is very monotonous, as over 15 total turns, players are simply going to pick one of their 4 cards, paying the cost to use them, and then taking that appropriate action. And they're going to repeat this process over and over until the game's conclusion. Now, I've only played the game 3 total times, which happens to be far fewer plays on average than what I typically like to designate before I review. Yet each group that I've introduced the game to had the exact same initial reaction about the game, and that it's great in theory, but its execution is very trite and very boring, especially since there is so little variety with only 4 total actions that you can partake in. And unfortunately, I have to agree with that same sentiment, because on top of the poorly constructed and very uninspiring components, there's just not enough meat within the actual game to justify repeated plays. Now, the game is not completely without merit, because there are some very nice elements to the game, especially some very clever scoring features that were really well thought out, and they fit the game's mood quite well. However, once again, it's simply not enough for us to warrant continued playthroughs from our particular group. And to be completely honest, doing a review like this for me is very difficult, because I typically don't openly show disdain for the games I review, since my process is usually different than most other reviewers out there. I personally only review games that I have requested from the designers or publishers themselves, or gone out and purchased myself, meaning that I have already taken a very keen interest in the game and am very familiar with the rules and the mechanics prior to its release. And the Heavens of Olympus falls squarely into this category, as I knew exactly what I was getting into prior to receiving the game. And unfortunately, like so many other things, it's very hard to judge anything until you've actually tried it for yourself. And this is just one of those cases. And unfortunately, it's only exacerbated by Rio Grande Games' inability to produce quality components in the first place. So this review has really been one of the more challenging obstacles for me personally, especially when taken into the context of what my recent reviews have included visually. And I had to ask myself if I truly wanted to spend 20 plus hours adding numerous graphical effects and camera shots and text overlays on a game that I personally just didn't truly enjoy, and the answer was quite simply no. And I genuinely feel bad for it, but in the end I am only going to put into a video what I take out from the game, and this one just didn't hit the spot for us. So for what it's worth, that is the Heavens of Olympus. I am Jeremy Salinas, and thank you very much for watching.